The Hollywood Dream. The Hollywood Dream.
Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Dream Podcast, the podcast where we talk to film and TV professionals about their journey towards reaching their big Hollywood dream, whatever that dream might be to them. In today's episode, I'm talking to writer and producer Katie Tibaldi. Katie has worked on tons of TV shows here in New York City. She was a producer in the show At Home with Amy Sedaris, and currently she's a writer on Amazon Prime's hit show Harlem. Just FYI, I record my podcast from my small studio apartment here in New York City. So you're going to hear my dog in the background here and there. You might hear a siren. So I apologize in advance. But besides that, I had a great chat with Katie. So please enjoy my conversation with Katie Tibaldi. How are you? It's been so long.
I know. How are you? I haven't seen you in so long. You're in
I know,
you in grad school right now?
I graduated in 2021. I went during the pandemic.
That's smart.
Yeah, and then I spent like 2 years trying to find work, and then I was not successful because
It's
I
rough.
just kept getting the same response.
Yeah, it's so rough right now too. Like, from the pandemic. I mean, so many of us had to stop working or just like find anything that we could do, and then now with like the writer's strike and director's strike and everything getting canceled so much and not as much stuff being made, it's just really hard.
I know. It sucks that like a lot of good shows are being canceled. I used to love the Gordita Chronicles. I don't know if you've seen that
yeah.
on HBO.
Yeah.
And they just cancel it.
Yeah, HBO has canceled so much. It makes me so sad. Like, I was working on At Home with Amy Sedaris when the pandemic happened. We actually finished shooting like 2 weeks before like all hell broke loose. So
Yeah.
like mid-February 2020. And so we were just getting ready to like move out of the office, and we were starting editing, and then it was like all of a sudden everything has to be from home, nothing can be in person, and people getting out of the city to be able to like save money and to be able to have more space during a time where obviously we couldn't be around a lot of people. So that was challenging to have everybody like working from different houses. Obviously Zoom became much more of a thing, and having to like be on the phone a lot and stuff like that. So it was definitely and it affected our show. Like, we finished editing during 2020, and then the third season came out and it went well. We had like the same audience following. We didn't lose any of our audience, which was really good, and very interactive. Amy has a really active following, so the fans were super excited to have something like funny to watch during like a tough time. And then basically we got largely canceled due to the pandemic, just because even though we shot exclusively in studio, which is safer than at least like having to deal with like all the outside locations and everything, and the challenges of not being able to control that as much. HBO, that was kind of the beginning of like them starting to, cut content. And it was sad for us because we had been on True TV, and then Warner Brothers accrued like True TV, TBS, TNT, and it was just like very small fish in a big pond. And we were super excited to be on HBO because we were finding all this new audience that was finding us there, and we were in like the top 10 most watched shows after midnight, and it was great for people who like didn't have True TV or didn't even know what True TV was to be like, why haven't I heard about this show? Like, this is so great, and then to have it come to a close just because of pandemic partially, but also just Warner Brothers was kind of in that mode of starting to cut stuff. So we were one of kind of the early shows, and then as you've seen, so many more shows have gotten cut since then. And I mean, we were Emmy nominated every season and had like a loyal following, so it was rough, you know, and it was rough for our crew to have to tell everybody, like, you know, we didn't get any closure or anything, because even like end of we were planning to have like a big screening of our first couple episodes with our cast and crew, and obviously we couldn't do that because of the pandemic. And then so many people were out of work from our crew and our cast, I mean almost everyone, because of the pandemic, that they were really hoping, you know, it was going to come back so that they'd have work, and then to have to deliver the news of like, it's not coming back, and just so many people being out of work was tough. And then I just feel like we keep getting hit. It's like the pandemic, and I mean, I am supportive of the strikes because there's a lot of issues. Obviously, we're seeing shows being taken off that have been made that don't even get to go on a network. You know, that are fully written, shot, edited, and then just like not put on air for like a tax break. You know, is really, really rough for creatives who put all this time into making something, then they don't even get a chance for people to see it. Or like our show, Amy's show now, every single day people still ask us like where they can stream it, and it's like the only places it's on now, because when HBO, you know, when HBO Max moved it to HBO Max, it was like they wanted that to be the premier destination people could watch it. And so suddenly it went from being on a bunch of different platforms like Amazon, iTunes, True TV, you know, all these different places, to it was only on HBO. And then when they pulled it, it's like now you can buy episodes on like YouTube TV and Google Play, but that's it. So we constantly have people being like, why can't we stream it? Like, when is it going to be back on Amazon? When is it going to be back on iTunes? Why isn't it on HBO Max? And it's like, all we can say is, tell them you miss it. You know, like, we would love for it to be streaming too. Or Amy has a big following internationally, and a lot of international audiences really are like, when can we get our hands on it? Especially like Australia, New Zealand, like all over the world. England, she has a really big following, and Canada even, and they're constantly...
Someone needs to start a hashtag.
I know. I'm always like, just all we can say is like, tell Warner Brothers, you know, but like, you feel bad because some of the fans are so passionate and they want to find it, and it's just like, people should be able to always watch, you know, things that were made, like even huge shows like Westworld, you know, now being pulled from like HBO. That was one of their like flagship shows, so nothing's really safe, you know, content wise. Like anything could be pulled, the smallest show that has a smaller audience, the largest audience. I mean, and so I really think that that's wrong. Everyone should be able to find content that's been made to rewatch. You know, we all have our shows that we love to rewatch and rewatch and rewatch. And
I know.
DVDs
especially
aren't. I mean, I think DVDs are going to come back, to be honest, because you just can't rely on digital media to exist forever.
I know, exactly. Like, especially there's so many streaming services.
I know.
They could easily just sell the show to another streaming service, but they just like erase it for some reason.
Yeah, I just think like, you know, a responsibility to the shows that you made, just that people should always at least be able to watch them. If you cancel them, you know, like that's their decisions. We can't control that, unfortunately, you know, like the people in charge make those decisions, but to not even have the content available readily for people, I just think, and then to not even put on shows that have been fully made, to even give them a chance, that's just really devastating for creators, but also audiences who, like I said, Amy having a heavy, really loyal following, like literally, you know, every week asking like, when can we find this? Where is it? Why can't we find it? And you're like, we want you to see it. It's just like not in our control, you know, unfortunately.
I know, that sucks.
Yeah.
Were you a producer in that show?
I was,
or a writer?
Yeah. I started as a writer's assistant the first season, and then got promoted to co-producer and then producer. We had a really, really small writing staff just because it was a smaller budget show. So helped write the show and helped produce the show, like helped with casting and, you know, a lot of different creative elements as far as working with all the different departments, from costumes to hair and makeup to sets and production design. And Amy has a really specific aesthetic that's really fun to lean into, that people, you know, really love. So it was she cares very much about every detail, which I think shows when you watch the show. It very much feels like her and has a uniqueness to it. So all of our department heads were incredible, but it was a lot of collaboration from a producing standpoint and also from a writing standpoint, because we were always trying to like make it the best it could be until the last second, and we didn't have the longest period of time to write, so it was like always writing, and then, you know, rewriting while we were shooting, and sometimes because of casting things and availability and stuff. So we had a lot of amazing guest stars on that show. We were really lucky just that want to work with Amy, and so that was really fun.
And what is the difference between like writing on a show like Amy's show and Harlem?
Yeah, well, Amy's show is more of like sketch variety, although it was very much scripted. I'd say it was kind of a combo of like a scripted half-hour kind of, not sitcom, but yeah, like a half-hour comedy meets like sketch comedy, because she played a lot of you know, characters, and we very much had a world, but then we could kind of do sketches within the characters she played in the world. Every episode was kind of a different theme. So it might be like a holiday, you know, like a holiday episode, like an episode that was inspired by a specific movie that we were kind of parodying our version of, versus, and we had like recurring things that would happen in episodes. So that was sort of similar to like a more traditional scripted show. And then Harlem is much more, and most of the shows I've worked on are much more like, you know, I mean, I think Amy's show and Harlem are both character driven, but Harlem's more exploring, you know, the full lives of these women, versus Amy's show is more like having fun in a world that like we don't even date when it could be happening. Like it could be present time, it could be 20 years ago, you know, 40 years ago. So we kind of intentionally leave it as like its own existence, versus Harlem's very much set in present time in Harlem, focused on, you know, 4 Black women in their 30s trying to figure out life like at that period of time in your life, which I think is really fun, because we don't get to see that time explored as much with women. It's usually more, you know, 20s. And these are women who are like fully in their 30s, and just the challenges that exist in trying to figure out like who you are and how you, in your 30s, you really, I think, come into your own, as far as like you've just experienced a bit more life. So you have I think a truer sense of who you really are and what you want, but it's still a journey, as it always is, to figure out, you know, life, relationships, what society tells you your life should look like versus what you actually want as a person.
And how is the writer's room in Harlem? How is that experience?
It's great, you know. It's mostly Black women and gay men, which is extremely rare. You know, I'm sure you know that most writers' rooms, sadly, even today still, you know, I've been in many rooms where I'm the only woman, or there's only a couple of women, let alone people of color. There may be one person, 2 people. I mean, it's still far too rare that you don't have more gender diversity, more, you know, people who aren't white in a room. So it's really refreshing. Like almost everyone who's in the room, I would say that this is the first room they've been in that is primarily women of color and gay men, and there aren't any straight white men, which is like unheard of. I've personally never experienced that before. I worked on my kind of first TV show that I worked on full time, Are We There Yet? It had, the showrunner was a Black man, and it was primarily people of color in the room. There were some white men, but primarily people of color, not a ton of women, for a show that we did 90 episodes in a year. So it was extremely, you know, challenging and constantly making stuff. But other than that, you know, it's usually often male showrunners, a lot of white people, not a lot of women. It's getting better. Like when I worked on Broad City, they had a lot of women in the room, which was nice. But, you know, it was also a show that had been really successful as a web series and then came to be a show. So they kind of had their core team, from that time, who've now gone on to, like, obviously Abby and Alana have done great things, but also Paul and Lucia, like, co-created Hacks and have gone on to, like, do a bunch of movies. And so, and also just rooms, unfortunately. I mean, this is part of what the writers' strike issues, are stacking up, and even for the Directors Guild and Actors Guild. But specifically for writers, rooms are smaller and smaller. And that's very difficult, both to execute the show well and have as much collaboration that can really, make it the best it can be, but also just to, like, get a script. I mean, a lot of rooms, if I've gone into as a writer's assistant or a script coordinator, or if someone comes in as a writer's PA or whatever, I mean, a lot of times there aren't even any opportunities to get a script. Like, all the scripts have already been assigned, or everyone who's in the room, even as a staff writer, is not getting a script. Like, that's common. I've worked on many shows where, like, not everyone got a script who was even staffed as a writer. Of course, we're all collaborating in the room, like doing punch-ups and, blue skying ideas and working on outlines and helping do joke passes for the scripts and stuff. But, you could be a staff writer. Staff writers don't get paid that much. And obviously, if you're a writer assistant script coordinator, you're definitely not making a lot of money. So it's hard if you can't even have the opportunity. Like, you could be the best you could be, and there's still no opportunity to even have the chance of getting a script is really tough. To make a living, to only be doing one job at once. I'm usually doing multiple jobs. Same with producing, because, the Producers Guild doesn't have any minimums like the Writers Guild or the Directors Guild or the Actors Guild does. So, like, you could be an executive producer, or you could be an associate producer, and you could be paid the same amount of money, because there's no minimums to say, like, no, an executive producer has to be paid at least this much, an associate producer is paid this much. So it's really hard. Like, I've worked on, I think that's why more women, I also work in documentary a lot, and the great thing about documentary is there's more women in positions of power as far as producing. But the reason for that is because there's very little money in documentaries. So you have to really be in it for the right reasons. But it's very difficult to make a living, because documentary films can take, a film that I produced took like 8 years to make. You don't know how long it's going to take, because the really fun thing is you don't know where the stories are going to go, right? You're following them as they're happening in real time. And so, but it's challenging. Like, I was working other full-time jobs all through making that film, but the film also required a lot of my attention, like helping find all the subjects and then being there to film. Like, the director and I were the only two ever, like, with our subjects. So, like, and keeping those relationships going to know what's going on in their lives, and just being like a support system for some of them. And, it requires a lot of work just on its own. It's a full-time job. But then, because, like, for that film, we completely produced it on our own, we were eventually able to first run features, like, distributed it. But, there's just not really, the only companies for documentaries that give substantial money to support is like HBO and then like PBS, and that's kind of it. Like, there are others, but it's pretty rare. So you really have to, like, believe in the project, and it requires a lot of, fundraising, applying. We applied for hundreds of grants. We got, lucky and got a few. We had support from Sundance and San Francisco Film Society, but, like, that was literally hundreds of grants to just get, like, a couple. And then there were times where we'd be in contention with, like, former Oscar nominees for, like, a $30,000 grant, and that's pretty discouraging when you're like, okay, they've, like, been nominated for Oscars, we're in, the finals with them, but, like, it's hard to, like, they're still having to try and go for $30,000 grants, which, like, in the scheme of things isn't that much money to, like, make a film from start to finish. So it's just requires a lot of sacrifice and requires a lot of juggling. And it, sometimes when I see the stats of people being like, well, more women are getting opportunity in documentaries. That's true, and that's great. But it is also because we're not being paid. And it requires a lot of, like, I think a lot of women are very empathetic people, or more empathetic. And so, like, you really care about the subjects and you care about the story. Not that people of all genders don't, but just, like, I think it's specific to why you see so many women, like, in documentaries, working their way up in the producing aspect, or even, maybe getting some more chances at directing, but producing specifically, because a lot of it's like work that people don't want to do, and for not a lot of money, and it could take years of your life. So, like, for me, I make documentaries because, like, I'm interested in, to me, sometimes people will be like, oh, you work in comedy, you work in documentary, you work in drama, like, those are so different. I personally really don't like being boxed in like that. I also think in this business, like, if you don't come from money, or you don't have, like, a spouse to support you, like, you just need to diversify to survive. And then also, really, to me, it's all just about telling great stories. So the thing about documentary that's incredible is, like, there really is no better story, because they're actual people's real stories that hopefully you feel compelled to tell. Like, people need to know these stories. They're not being told, which is really incredible, I think. And then the same thing when you're creating a story from scratch, right? It's like, well, what are you trying to say? What are you trying to bring? Like, are you trying to bring, people joy, or to talk about things that you're passionate about that you think a lot of people could relate to? So they actually have a lot in common, I think, and a lot of the filmmakers that I'm really drawn to don't limit themselves, like, by being put in a box. I mean, I think the industry really tries to put people in a box, and they're very like confused if you're like, well, what do you mean you're doing documentaries but you do comedy? Like, I don't understand. You're just kind of like, I don't really know how to explain if you don't understand. To me, it's just like, I'm drawn to telling good stories, and so that could be any medium. It could be web series, it could be podcast, it could be documentary, it could be television. I think it's just something that I enjoy, in a way to, like, diversify your opportunities, but also just, like, not limit yourself to the kind of stories you want to tell.
I know I'm trying to do a short documentary.
Cool.
But I'm kind of nervous about it, because I'm not really familiar with that genre. And I applied for a grant, and I found out that I'm a finalist.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. But part of me doesn't want to get the grant, because I'm like, oh shit, I have to do this now.
I think it's like anything, right? It's like we all, like, sometimes are, I don't know about you, but sometimes, when you're working on something, or you're trying to choose, like, what you're going to write next, what you're going to make next, there's all this pressure that, like, this needs to be better than the last thing I made, or this needs to, exceed expectations or whatever. But for me, I think a huge, like, to me, when people are like, what's success? Because I think this business is so hard. I have friends who are, like, very successful. I have, friends who are very much still trying to make their way. I have friends who are just starting out. Like, the thing to me is, like, success for me at this point, this many years in, just trying to, being an artist, to me is success. Like, if I can just continue to be an artist, to me, that is success. It'd be great to have more financial stability. It'd be great to be able to help more people that I want to help, work their way up in the business, and to change things that I want to change, like what rooms look like, or who's hired, or who's in charge. And I do try to do that when I have any kind of power, or when I'm doing my own projects, yes, let's have a mostly female crew, like, because it's just so rare you ever see that I want to have that be the case. It doesn't mean I don't know some, like, wonderful men that I work with, of course, but we're still, people of color, women, LGBTQ, we're still hugely disrepresented in this industry. And so why not give, yourself the opportunity to have what you often don't have, on sets or in situations, but also to be able to like collaborate with people that you'd love to collaborate and maybe don't have control of. So I think with just like everything we make, I think we get better. The more we make stuff, the more we write stuff. So it's like with a doc, it's like, just allow yourself, you'll be surprised. I mean, you're a storyteller, so it really isn't different in that sense. The only difference is like you are discovering the story as you're shooting it, because you don't know where the people's lives, are going to go. But it has really the structure of any story. Like, okay, who are your characters? What's the arc? I personally really like shooting verite with documentaries, where you're just like not doing interviews, just capturing what happens. And of course, how you edit, you are bringing some of your own storytelling lens to how you see their story. But generally, I really love when it's like you're just capturing it exactly as it happens and then putting it together, because I just feel like that. I mean, there are documentaries I love where they interview people too, but just personally, I'm drawn to verite a lot, because it's like I'm letting the people speak for themselves without me prompting, asking questions, just capturing it as it happens. It takes more patience, because you're not going to have that like golden answer to cut to, or like the talking head to be like, explain what we just saw. You're having to work on the editing so much, and to also give the audience like a little bit more freedom of like interpretation of what they're seeing. But I think there's something really beautiful in that. But yeah, I have no doubt you'd be great making a documentary, and I think there's things about it that you'd be surprised how much you enjoy, both that you have in common with the stories you've told before, and then also ways you haven't told a story, because the way you feel such a responsibility to the people that you're portraying, and having to like let things happen as they happen and not interfere. But it is quite a privilege to let people let you tell their stories and to show what they're going through, which sometimes can be really, up and down as life is. And you get to be there for those moments. And I do consider that like quite a privilege. And to know when I'm not here anymore, like, well, these are stories I'm leaving behind that I think need to be told, that aren't being told, and like to be able to be proud of that, So I think you'll love it.
What was your documentary about?
It's called Street Fighting Men. It's about three men in Detroit, which is my entire family's from Detroit area. Grew up there, and it's each of a different generation. One's in his 20s, one's in his 40s, one's in his 60s, and sort of the parallels. It's really about like how difficult it is to get out of poverty in America. And generationally, how we can see that. Like our oldest subject they're all black men in Detroit, and he's a former retired cop who's now, patrolling his neighborhood to help keep it safe, because in Detroit there's, a lot of issues with neighborhoods just being able to not have, like, if something happens that, there's issues with the police, obviously, and then there's issues with not being enough police to respond to immediate issues if it's not like directly like something they have to respond to right away. And then just like people moving out of the city because of issues in neighborhoods. So, and then people who can't move out of the city but wanting it to be safer and to have more community. So our oldest subject, Jack Rabbit, like he remembers Detroit kind of in its heyday when it was like at the height of like Motown and a wonderful time in the city. And then once the riots happened, how that changed a lot of things. And then Detroit just does not have enough resources, period. And there's been a lot of corruption in politics. And so he just like with his neighbors and specifically one of his friends, they just like ride around and try to like hear what's going on in the neighborhood, try to make people feel safer. If things are getting stolen out of houses or if there's a drug house, like monitoring those situations. And they've been ranked the last few years the safest neighborhood in Detroit, which he's very proud of. But that's his perspective. And then we have our middle subject who He's the first to go to college in his family. They came from Jamaica to Detroit when he was like 10 years old. And he went to college and then was able to save money to buy some houses to like flip in Detroit. And then the 2008 crash happened, and it really devastated people who own properties in Detroit because they were suddenly like worth nothing. And so he buys this one house, and it was a former crack house, and he's living in it without running water and without heat and stuff, to fix it up on his own. And his church is helping him, and some of his family, and he's putting everything into it. And then when we filmed, the house burnt down, which was really devastating. We don't know if it was targeted specifically. There was like a drug house across the street that he didn't think they liked him living across the street from him. Could have been that, or it could have just been like random, someone throwing something into the house. But it burned the whole back of the house, and so that was extremely devastating because he lost all of his possessions, and thankfully his dog survived, which was kind of his sole companion. But you see someone who's making first for their family, but just how difficult it is without having like financial resources to help you, and without having, like, most people are just getting by, so they can't help other people because like they're barely getting by themselves. So that was, he went through a lot of ups and downs. And then our youngest subject kind of knew it. He's only known Detroit to be really challenging. His dad was in jail since he was 2, and he was, his mom got addicted to drugs and had abusive boyfriends, and he asked to be removed from his home when he was like 12 years old, and then was in and out of foster care. And he was actually a really good football player, and so that looked like it was maybe gonna be something, but he got shot after a football game by like a rival school. And so you see him in the movie, he's trying to get his GED. He's going to this program where they teach you practical construction skills and certifications while also getting your GED. And then just like how difficult, he has a young daughter, and how difficult it is if like, your average young person getting up at 4 a.m. so they can take their daughter to daycare by taking 3 buses because they don't have a car, and then getting to school by 8 or 8:30, and just having no support. Like at one point he gets picked up because he's crashing in a house with friends where some people are selling drugs, and he goes to jail, and like he called us. Thankfully he got out because he wasn't doing anything, but he was in jail for a few weeks, and we were the people he called just because he knew he could count on us to like be there for him. And so I think that's, we just try to show with the film like how incredible it is, the resistance that people have despite things that happen to them, that a lot of them, if one of the things happened to someone, they would be like, I give up, or like wouldn't keep trying. And yet all 3 of our subjects, and then some of the supporting people that are also featured, like they're giving so much to try and make things better. Like Darius is trying to make things better for his daughter than he had it. Jackrabbit really cares about his neighborhood and wants it to be like what he remembers it kind of in the heyday, and just to be a safe place for everyone who lives there and to be a community. And then Luke just kind of having the dream of like the American dream of owning a home and having his own, his own thing, and creating community starting with one house. These are all things people can relate to, but just how difficult it is for anyone to have those things in America these days, but also especially if you're a Black man and everyone is just trying to get by. It's very, very, very difficult to pull yourself out of that, like, because it's just a cycle, it's so they incredibly inspired me, just of like how much shit they are dealing with on a regular basis. And yet, not to say they don't have times where they are really depressed. Like when Luke's house burned, it was incredibly terrible moment for him. He was in a really, really dark place for several months, understandably. But the fact that they keep trying, to me, is just really inspiring, because it's hard when you're just constantly getting beat down by life. And as soon as it seems like you're getting any traction, something else happens that you can't control.
I know. And what drew you to tell their story?
I mean, I always, like my whole family's from Detroit. A lot of them still live in the Detroit area. And so I always just found it to be a place that I had taken a class at, I went to undergrad at the University of Michigan my first 2 years just to like do my gen eds. And I took this history of the American family class where we focused on Detroit a lot because obviously it was right next to Ann Arbor. And, it's just a city where so many people have gotten screwed over despite it being a place of great innovation and obviously like a real hub for people of color, not just Black people, but even today there's so many people from the Arabic community who live there that come from immigrate to the States, and there's a huge community for that in the Detroit area. And just the way that what was once in the top largest cities in America and was producing obviously like all the cars and had a lot of industry, just the ways that it's been continually screwed over, specifically because it's mostly Black, like the way that redlining's happened there of like Black neighborhoods that were doing really well. Oh, okay, now we're gonna put a rail tracks through this neighborhood, or we're gonna force people out of this neighborhood. And there's been a lot of corruption in the government there, which has been a huge problem. And I just think personally, like the thing I'm most proud of with the film is when we showed it in Detroit, we got to screen it at the Detroit Institute of the Arts, which if anyone gets a chance to check out is like an incredible museum. And it was for the Detroit Free Press Film Festival, and so we screened there, and then at this place called Cinema Detroit in Detroit, which is like an independent movie theater. But the people who are from Detroit and live in Detroit really responded to the film, because I think we tell it in a really honest way. Like we're not, like I said, it's all verite, so it's all as it happened. And we worked on it we shot for almost 4 years to really capture the essence of what's happening in the city and these people who are so resilient despite just continually having to deal with so much that you can't predict, and then some that you can predict that's just like cyclical, and still trying to make their lives better, make the lives of the people around them better, their families better. I don't feel like that's a story, I think a lot of people who make films about Detroit go in and they're talking about like artists who are living there or like white people who are living there, and that was important to us of like having 3 Black men of different generations and seeing what's similar and seeing what's different, just based on their age and how long they've lived in the city and how difficult it is to, like, some people just be, would say, like, with our youngest subject, like, why doesn't he just go to college, or why don't they move out of the city? And it's like, those aren't options. I mean, those aren't options. Like, they can't afford to move out of the city. And he would love to go to college, but he doesn't have the money for that. Like, he's struggling to have safety, power, food, be able to take care of his daughter. He doesn't have his own transportation. And I just think there's a lot of things that people don't think about. And then also to see, Jackrabbit, our oldest subject, lives a life that's so devoted to service. Like, every day even though he's retired from being a police officer, he's like someone that people call in the neighborhood instead of calling the police. And he's doing these, neighborhood community patrols to like try and keep things safer, like from people's furnaces getting stolen out of their house when they're not home, like all these kind of things that, how many people do you know who are doing anything with their neighbors, let alone every single day, and Luke, just like the fact that he just had this what's supposed to be an American dream, which I think owning a home is like so hard. I don't know that I'll ever own a home in my life. It's also not really a goal of mine, but it's so hard in today's world just with how expensive everything is, let alone if you're the first person doing things in your family, like going to college. And then just we keep having, the 2008 housing crash and the pandemic and just all the things that you can't predict that affect you even more if you're coming from a position where your every day is just a struggle to like get through the day. And I think that's what not enough people, in my opinion, understand, of just like, no, but if you tomorrow like had your house burned down, like, would you have people who could take you in? Like, would you have people who could help give you clothes or help give you food, or, you know, just have a safe place to stay? And, you know, some of us would, like, even if our families don't have a lot of money, you could stay with your family, or, you know, someone would help you recoup some of the things you lost. And that's just not the case for more and more people in this country who are just like struggling to get by. But I just really admire their like ability to keep trying to make things better despite so many circumstances against them.
Yeah. And is your documentary available somewhere so we could see it?
Yeah, you can watch it on Amazon. You can watch it on iTunes. You can watch it on Ovid TV, which is like a documentary platform. You can buy it on DVD from First Run Pictures, which were, First Run Features, which we're really excited to be part of their permanent collection, because they're like the longest running documentary and foreign film company in the U.S. And you can also, if you have a library card, you can watch it via Canopy, which is like the free, you know, all the free films you can watch just with a library card.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I have a library card.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of really great films, especially documentaries, but even just all kinds of films and TV shows and obviously books too. But yeah, the Canopy aspect is like the video aspect of the library.
I know you have to get ready to go to work, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. But will you do a rapid fire question for 2 minutes?
Of course.
Okay. It's just to get to know you more. The number to beat is 16.
Okay, wow. That's impressive in 2 minutes.
I know. Well, they're easy questions. They're all about you. Okay. So, start the clock. What is your go-to karaoke song?
I feel like Islands in the Stream is like a good group. That's what one of my best friends, Merica, and I really like to do that one. Or like some kind of pop, you know, bop of the moment. Okay.
Who is your current celebrity crush?
Ooh, current celebrity crush. Oh, God. I don't know, like Michael B. Jordan or like Ryan Gosling.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like those are like...
He's sexy.
Yeah.
What is your favorite emoji?
Probably like the hug heart emoji. I feel like I like that one.
What is your biggest virtual pet peeve? Or just regular pet peeve?
My biggest virtual pet peeve. Maybe like, I don't know, people who are thoughtless about what they post.
Most unique place you've visited?
Ooh. I've been to Bali once for one of my best friend's wedding. He's from the Philippines, which is like an hour from Bali. So I don't know if I'll ever return, but it's an incredible place, and I'm really glad I was able to get there once.
Background noise, or do you work in silence?
Ooh, depends on my mood. Sometimes I very much need a playlist, or I'll listen to like classical music to focus sometimes, and then sometimes I need just like a general playlist to kind of feel my different emotions. But sometimes if I'm reading the script out loud, I want it to be silent. I like to read the script a lot to hear how it sounds. Okay. Favorite TV show? Ooh, God, there's so many. That's like an impossible question for me. Of course, I love Succession. I think it's brilliant. I love the show Starstruck. It's like one of my favorite shows. It's a BBC show that Rose Matafeo created. Those are two that I really love. And favorite movie? Oh, favorite movie. Timer's up. Yes, we ran out of time. That's another one that's so hard. There's so many great movies. Just depends on my mood. You got 8. Okay, that's not 16. The 16 person was really focused. I know, she was really fast. Yeah. I should just do like yes, no, like very quick answers, but
I know. Maybe I'll change the questions to make them like yes or no, so it could be easier.
You got a lot of. It's a fun way to get to know people. I'd like to
Yeah.
know your answers, so I feel like it'd be fun to hear you say your answers.
I know. I think I'll have a hard time answering them. I know that for the karaoke song is Barbie Girl by Aqua.
Oh, that's a classic. Yeah. There's some that are just like you can't go wrong with, right? And then I always love when you get surprised. Like I have a friend, Dagmar, she'll do like Bjork, like which I think's like so impressive to take on for a karaoke. But she's a very good singer and she just like bops around the room, you know, kind of like the Oh So Quiet Bjork song. So she'll like do that and just be like fully going for it. So she's able to pull it off. But I feel like very few people could pull off that karaoke. And then some are just like, you know, everybody join in and yell at the screen together. Those are kind of my favorites.
I know. And then I guess my last question would be like, is there any advice you would give to someone who's trying to break into TV, to be a writer, producer? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think most important is like realize that everyone has their own voice, and so try not to compare yourself to other people. I think that's something I really learned in film school, as much as I don't love having the debt from it. Aside from just being surrounded by other really talented people and how that pushed me to get better, also it pushed you to realize like I try my best not to feel competitive with other people, because we all have our own voice and we're all on our own journey, and so much of it's like persistence and luck and timing. There's so many aspects you can't control. The only thing you can really control is like finding your specific voice, what makes you unique, or what are you most excited about creating, and focusing on that and trying to lean into that as much as you can. So like don't be so hard on yourself about making things. Just make things, just write things. And like with both of us, you know, we've made web series or short films. Like those can be great things to make while you're doing a day job, or while you're doing a job in the industry that's like not at all what you want to be doing, or that's frustrating to be doing every day because you're not getting to like write or direct. Like I would love to be directing more. In some ways it's the thing I love the most to do, but it's so challenging, as we know, for like female filmmakers to get the opportunity. So I keep trying to make that happen for myself, and you know, luckily some friends asked me to direct things, but I would love to be directing more. So I have to keep making that happen for myself, and then hope that that will lead to more opportunities down the line. But I just think like comparison can be I've seen it drive a lot of people out of the business. And also just like if you don't have things for yourself, you need to have a balance. Like it's so hard. So many of us have multiple jobs we're working at once while also working on projects, or we have a family, like, you know, or parents that we need to help take care of, all these things. It's hard to find a balance. But I think I would also say always have something you're working on that brings you joy, whether it's something you're writing, something you're directing and making with friends, you know. And then I also think find your people is like one of the biggest things I would say, like, and find the people who have the same kind of spirit that they bring to creating. So like the people who also want to have inclusivity, you know, like that's something that's really important to me, or people who have a no asshole policy on set, which is not many. There are many people in the business that's not the case. You know, even in film school you see that. Like look for the collaborators, look for the people who have the same kind of attitude and spirit that you bring to the work, and also who are excited about making things. Like I think something that makes me sad in the business the longer I'm in it is when you see people who get so jaded, and I understand why, because the business can really beat you down. But like I don't personally ever want to be not excited about other things people are making too. Like when you say like what's your favorite TV show, or what's your favorite film, like there's so many. I love like old films, I love indie films, I love documentaries, and I find a lot of inspiration for it. And same with like you'll see in comedy, a lot of times people are like, well, I never want to watch comedy because I write comedy. And I understand that to a degree, because it's like you're thinking about it in a different way when you're writing it. But at the same time, like that would make me so sad if I ever tuned into someone who couldn't, like, you know, like I see Rose Montefeo like making Starstruck. Like I really am inspired by her as a performer and a creator, and it would just make me so sad if I couldn't appreciate things that other people are making and also want to help, you know, hopefully each other make stuff. Like, I know with you too, right? It's like you find your people and it's like, okay, I'm making something and like, I want you to be a part of it, or can you help, you know, with this aspect, and I'll work on your thing. And I think even as you work your way up, like if I look at like Amy Sedaris, you know, like her and Stephen Colbert and Paul Dinello, like they've been working together since they were like 24 years old, you know, and they're still working together. And I think like they still have a genuine love for making things, and a playfulness. Like I never want to lose also just like, I love being silly. I can be a really serious person. I can make documentaries about serious things, but I also love being silly. And I do feel like in this capitalistic world, we're so often like pushed to live a certain life, have success look like a certain thing. You know, to me, success, like I said, is just being able to continue to make art and to hopefully be able to make a living at it. It would be good to have it be less stressful sometimes, but
I know.
Yeah, those are kind of my big things. Like find your people, find your voice, make things that make you happy, and don't lose yourself in a business that often is trying to like make everybody be the same or put you into a certain kind of box. Like just be who you want to be. Make the stuff that you think needs to be made or that's not being seen, or that isn't out there. Because, you know, so often now, especially with all these reboots and everything, it's like everyone wants something that's they feel like is guaranteed success, but then like what are the shows or films that you're really drawn to? Usually ones that are original, you know, that are like a new voice or have a different angle or aren't being represented. And so like I think, you know, that can be easy to get lost in, especially when it's just really hard to survive as a creator. But if you can focus on, you know, what brings you joy about it and try to not be forced in a box, I think, you know, and just have persistence. I mean, so much of the business is persistence. Even people you see who might have a high peak of success, it's going to come down and it's going to go up and it's going to come down. And that's just kind of the ride that artists are on. Like, if anything, the pandemic, I think, has taught us, like, you know, I kind of try to take it one day at a time. Like, I don't know what I'm doing often, like, rarely more than months in advance, just because that's the life of an artist. And so I think you kind of just have to embrace that. It can be difficult sometimes, the uncertainty, but I do think uncertainty is a big part of it. So you just have to kind of, like, embrace it and lean into it, because that's always going to be an aspect of being an artist, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice. Katie, thank you so much for your time. I know you have to go to work, so I don't want to keep you here.
No, thanks for having me on, and congrats on your first season of the podcast. And
thank you.
I look forward to seeing what you make next, maybe the documentary, or if it's another series, or whatever it ends up
I know.
being.
I think I'm gonna. I'll let you know about the documentary. But if I get the grant, I'll definitely have to do it because I have a year to do it.
Yeah, I hope you do get the grant, and I'm sure it'll be a great experience. And yeah, I'm happy to offer anything I've learned during the process.
Thank you.
A lot of documentary, I feel like, is just kind of figuring it out as you go, where your subjects go. But yeah, it was great chatting with you, and I hope we will have to get together in New York soon.
I know.
When I'm back, and yeah, because I was gonna say we met at the Big Apple Film Festival when we.
I know we met a while ago.
Series, so.
You had your web series. I had a short film.
Yeah. That's right.
Quick question before you go: are you still working on Seeking Sublet, or you shelved it?
Yeah, Seeking Sublet has had a lot of ups and downs. You know, it's about two roommates trying to find their permanent third roommate in New York City, which I feel like if anyone who's lived in a big city can relate to, or if you've just had roommates, that constant kind of every episode is basically them trying to live with a different person, which is a story that I know well. Still have roommates in New York and have had many subletters, many roommates over the years, some really great, some not so great. And so there's a lot of fodder. Our cast is fantastic. A lot of my cast has actually gone on to do a lot of exciting things, like be starring in TV shows or being in films and making their own stuff. One of them's like a very popular person on YouTube, like vlogger now and creative person. So that's been cool to see. Yeah, we actually had genuine interest in the series, which was exciting. And it did really well on Funny or Die. We got a lot of views and played festivals like you did with your short film. And it was a great experience. I would love to make it into a full series. Hopefully I'll be in a position to do that someday. I think when the pandemic happened, it kind of closed down a lot of development at that time. And so, yeah, I have a few things I'm working on, but that's always one on the back burner that we just got such a reaction from people in the world, just because everyone can tell bad roommate stories. Yeah. Which is, even when I cast my cast, it was like the first round, you know, like, just tell me some of your worst roommate stories. And no one didn't have one. They were just like, how many do you want? You know, like, especially living in
I know,
New
it's a relatable story.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get to do more with it down the line. But I'm proud of the 9 episodes we made. And it was really great getting to play festivals, like, all over the U.S. to see it with, like, a Nashville audience, a New York audience, an L.A. audience, a Portland audience. So, yeah, I think web series are a great way to, like... I've also been able to show it to people for work. You know, it's like, here's something I wrote, directed, produced, cast, to kind of fully show the scope of what you're capable of. So I think that's helped me with some jobs, just because people don't always want to read stuff. They're just like, oh, I can, you know, watch this. That's easier than having to, like, read a bunch of stuff. So I think it's a good thing for people to make if they're interested in making TV or film. You know, it's just a good way to show, here's 5 episodes I made, 10 episodes I made, multiple seasons. You know, and most of our episodes we shot in a day or a day and a half, just because of the budget that we had, which was very small. So, but it was like, even that, you know, the fact that you can be like, we made this in a day, we made this in 2 days. I mean, obviously time goes into editing it and stuff, but it's a good way to show, like, what you're capable of under pressure as well. That I think can be useful for people. It's also great if you have more time and you can make it, like, look the best ever and everything, but not all of us have that, you know, and anyone can, like, with iPhones these days, like, you can just, like, shoot something on an iPhone and it can look really good. And really, it's just for me about, especially with comedy, it's about the cast is such a huge part of it, you know, and, like, I like to collaborate with actors a lot, so I like to improv on set and, like, always have the scripts be the best they can be. But then after we get scripted takes, like, okay, let's try some takes where people can try anything, or I'll yell out jokes, you know, to try and in the moment. And I think for me personally, that creates the best environment when you're directing, just because, especially for comedy, because the actors feel more a part of it. And wouldn't you know it, so many times an actor will have, like, the best line in the moment that you're just like, oh man, I worked on that script for so long and you, like, came up with the best joke. But it's also, like, such an adrenaline rush to, like, have those kind of moments. And I find, you know, some actors aren't improvers, and that's okay too. You don't need everyone to be, but if you have some people who are, you know, grounded in the scene, and then you have some people who are able to just try things, I think that's often the best combination. And that was the case in Seeking Sublows. Like, our core characters were exceptional actors, really grounded in the moment. Improving wasn't as much their thing. They could do it, but then we had some supporting cast who was really, really strong at improving, and so it was kind of the perfect balance, because our core two were always super grounded in the scene, and then the, you know, some of the supporting cast could really, like, try stuff that it was fun to see them react to just in the moment as the characters. So, yeah, I really think it's a great way to show what you're capable of. And like I said, you can do it relatively cheap and still have something that, you know, people can respond to. Because with comedy, I think ultimately people are going to respond most to the performances, right? And the characters relate to the characters. So, that doesn't need to have flashy camera work or, you know, expensive equipment. Like, it's great if you can have that, but I think if you can make people laugh, if you can make people care about the characters, that's what they're going to remember far more than, you know, oh, that looks so beautiful. I mean, it's great if they can look beautiful, but, you know, it's more expensive a lot of times to pull off that kind of stuff. So, and write something where you can shoot it. We shot Seeking Sublet mostly in my apartment in the streets of New York City. So it's like, we didn't have to have money for all these locations. And I mean, yeah, it was really challenging sometimes shooting it in my real apartment, but I also wanted to have that claustrophobic feel where it's like what a New York City apartment can feel like people on top of each other, you know, and I think everybody can relate to that that's had roommates of just like, like I need my own space. You know,
is the web series still online?
It's not online right now just because we had interest, but there's a bunch of sketches on Funny or Die still that people can watch. It's called Seeking Sublet, and we still have a Twitter and stuff. But I hope to put the episodes up somewhere permanently soon, regardless of development that hopefully will happen down the road. But yeah, what about your short film? Have you thought about doing a feature with that? Because I know it kind of had that aspect like where it could be a
I
feature.
just didn't do... it just stayed as a short. I didn't really... I just wanted to do something, and like I had that story in my head for a while.
Yeah.
So it was just a short that I wanted to do. I didn't really have like plans for the future with it.
Yeah. Well, it's great when you have a short. Like when we made Street Fighting Men, we also made a short doc that just was something that happened with a person we were following. He's not a main character in the series, but or in the film, but it was just something that happened over the course of a weekend, and it was just like, oh, that's perfect for a short. You know, like literally it happened over 2 days, and it was just the perfect kind of story for a short. So sometimes, I feel like the best shorts are kind of the ones that. I mean, it's nice if it can be a calling card for maybe a series or for a feature film, but also I really enjoy shorts that just like really work as a short, like you know, a story that's really good for a shorter format.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to have it, just like you said, it's good to have just to show people that you're able to do stuff, you know, create and produce your own stuff so they could see what you're capable of.
Yeah, and I think like the best thing I love about indie filmmaking, which like I love and continue to do a lot of, is, you know, just like there's a real community in it, and people wanting to like, you have to learn so much on your feet, and you have to like even if you have experience or you went to film school or whatever, like just making you know, indie stuff is such a labor of love because there's usually like, you know, not a huge crew and not a lot of money, and you just have to be resourceful. And I think it's really helpful for later if you have more resources, because you kind of know like where to put money and where you can, you know, okay, we don't need as much for this, but we really need it for these things, or just it helps you prioritize. And then just like the aspect of multitasking, once you've had to do so much on your own or with a really small team, it makes other things seem easy because you're like, oh, you have all this time and you have all this equipment and you have, you know, more resources. So I think it's a really, really useful skills that are learned in those kind of condensed experiences where you just have to make it happen. And that's always useful for anything you're making, even if you have the biggest budget. Or like I was listening to a podcast recently, and Damien Chazelle and two of his producers, you know, who made like Babylon and Whiplash and all those movies, they were saying even though Babylon was the biggest budget that he's had, I think, to make any of his work, that there were days where like, because it was such an ambitious film, I haven't seen it yet, but it was such an ambitious film that the producers were just like, every day we were having to be like, and it was shot during the pandemic, so like, are we gonna have enough extras? Like, can we like, do any assistants want to be like extras? Like, you know, or they were talking about a tracking shot where, you know, like things kept breaking down, like the thing that was supposed to pull it broke down, so then they got a wagon, then that broke down, and it was just the way you have to problem solve all the time. I think making shorts and making like web series or digital content is super helpful, or short, you know, any kind of short film, because it's a lot of problem solving and making it happen with less than ideal circumstances, which is like gonna really serve you when you do have more resources, because you just know what to like prioritize and be able to deal with anything that comes your way.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about my dog whining the whole time in the background.
No, I'd like to see the dog before I go, because I love dogs.
Oh, wait, let me show you. Lucky. Okay, so I'll let you go because I know you have to go to work.
Yes, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks for having me on, and good luck with the rest of the podcast. And
thank you.